Hello and welcome to another edition of the Tigers Down Under. I'm your host Alex, and with me I have Logan. How are you feeling, Logan?
Mate, I'm on the mend. I think that the 3 points this morning certainly helped, improve the overall state of my health. But I've been battling the flu, but that's okay. It's as I said, it's always made a little bit easier with a positive result like this morning.
Yeah, I tweeted out yesterday. We had a bit of a crisis of health amongst the podcasters. It was like, some teams in the EFL, when they've had COVID rip through the team and they haven't been able to front up for selection. And we had everyone out with something yesterday. It was pretty crazy. So do appreciate you coming on today. And as you said, I reckon the 3 points this morning was the perfect tonic for everyone's health. We will get to that game in a second. We'll probably talk pretty briefly about the Birmingham game, because I don't know if there's a whole lot to say about that fixture itself, I must admit. Finishing 0-0 as it did with very few chances. Probably, to be honest, our best chance coming in just about the first minute of the game. I think it was McLaughlin put Lewis Potter through, had a pretty decent chance at goal, but that was just about as good as it got.
It really was. It was one of those interesting games where you kind of you almost got the feeling that something could happen in it, but it just was one of those I wouldn't even say huff and puff games. It was end to end. There was limited chances, but yeah, it didn't really feel like either side was, supremely dominant. It wasn't a game full of, much class. It was just kind of a gritty performance of two teams that, were kind of just looking to get anything really at this end of the season to kind of stave off the approaches of the bottom three. So it looked like that game. It felt like that game. And as you said, there wasn't much to write home about it, except for the fact that we came away with a very crucial point.
Yeah, and I'm quite glad in the end that we've ended up doing the podcast today, because there's a lot more to talk about with the Coventry game. And it gives that point a bit more context and a bit more hope that it's now 2 games undefeated. Yeah, I guess with the Birmingham game itself, I can't really think of too much else to say about it. So it is a pretty short review on that one. Other than, I guess, it was a solid lineup. We had Longman back in at right wing back. We had Eves up top, which I think last week with Mike, I was sort of saying Eves as an option up forward offers something a bit different from the other strikers that we have, a bit more physical than Tyler Smith and a bit more, I guess, active in the play than Marcus Force is. And then Longman back in at right wing back. I think if we're going to play him, I think that's where we play him. I just don't know if he really suits that front three, or at least hasn't had any particularly standout games in that front three. And we'll talk in a second about this morning's game, and certainly he really stood out in that position again. So really solid selection. I think that's just about our best 11, I would say. We sort of talked a little bit about what we'd do with the new signings in January and where they fit into the side. And probably the answer is off the bench, really. I mean, I find it pretty difficult to sort of split which players in that 11 that started against Birmingham could be improved upon in our current players.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, as you mentioned before, in regard to Longman, I think him playing right wing back is certainly his position. If you go back and look at his goals this season too, a lot of them seem to come from deeper. And when I say that, I mean he usually gets the ball deeper, or he's kind of sniffing around on the edge of the box. So it kind of seems a little bit pointless to play him higher up. As you said, he probably doesn't have the same level of impact in an attacking sense that much further up the pitch, which is kind of, I know it's a strange thing to say, but it seems to be where he seems to flourish the most. And with a player like him with such a work rate, he's certainly proven himself that he can do a role. And as you mentioned, because Tom Eaves is so different, if you do play Longman at right wing back and you put Tom Eaves up top, then there is a very different dynamic to our attack, which can only be put into place with those two on the pitch. So yeah, I agree, and I think that the team that we played with Birmingham probably is our best 11. I mean, you can mention that some of the new signings, on paper probably are higher quality or higher caliber players, but they certainly haven't earned their stripes or forced their way into the team with with anything credible so far. I mean, granted, there has been a little bit of injury, that's probably to blame for that. But yeah, there's no reason why players like Tom Eaves aren't there for the World Cup start, which is a very strange thing to say, given Tom Eaves' career at Hull City's been.
And I was going to say, I mean, it is a bit strange to be saying it's probably our most cohesive 11 given the performance against Birmingham. But I suppose the sort of the proof or the evidence is more in the performance we saw against Coventry, and having that settled lineup. I know Slater came in for Doherty against Coventry, but having that settled lineup, we almost saw the fruits of it in the second game rather than necessarily straight away against Birmingham. But yeah, pretty strong. I guess you have 3 players to give MVP votes in this one. It's probably a tricky one to pick players out from.
Look, I'm simply going on the whoscored.com, and the stat for me is just the man who keeps coming to mind is Fleming. If you look at his numbers at the moment and what he's doing, particularly in a gutsy 0-0 draw, he just seems to be in the thick of everything, and seems to be able to create stuff for us as well. I know I'm jumping ahead, but there was a passage this morning where he kind of ended up in a tussle with like 2 players and kind of spun out of it, and then ended up like beating the second guy, and then just like taking off up the sideline. I was so impressed to watch a player that has that that heart, but also just that resolve to just continue to find a way out of those challenges. And you often see him put himself in a situation that looks like it's going to be dangerous, and then all of a sudden
he just gets through them. Yeah.
Danny, and he's out of it. And so he's a really exciting player. So in a 0-0 game, he was my standout. I really struggled with this one, Alex. To give you a 2 and a 1, I think I'd just be grabbing the dartboard and having a blind throw. Look, if I have to, for the sake of putting the points, I think you probably have to keep it going with KLP, given the fact that you mentioned he did have a couple of decent chances, or maybe it was him that had the chance at the start, near the start. But I think he's probably in there. You maybe give him the 2 points, and then I don't know. Look, if it's 0-0, I'll probably give it to Greaves purely because a centre back and a 0-0. There's some level of sense in that, but it's a very tough one.
No, good shout. And look, I know it's a tough one. These ones are always tough in these sorts of games because you're trying to pull 3 players out. And actually, I had almost the same issue with the Coventry game for the opposite reason, is there's just too many players to fit in. But look, I went with Fleming for the 3 votes as well. I thought he was outstanding. He's really developing week on week, and we sort of made the comparison a few weeks ago to Andy Robertson, and you really see that likeness, as you say, with that sort of fearlessness and that ability to just push up the field, take on players, and whip that ball into the box is brilliant to see. I went Ingram for the 2. You could probably have given it to him for this morning as well. Really, back-to-back clean sheets for him. And it's a really interesting conversation now about what happens when Baxter's back fit, because it's the same as at the start of the season, except now we're actually picking up performances and results. It makes it a really interesting battle between the 2 for who actually gets the nod between the sticks. And then I went KLP for the 1. As you said, I had probably our best chance of the game and was an attacking player, and I was grasping at straws just like you were. So went for those 3. But Greaves as well is a good shout as well for a good performance. Cool. Okay. Well, the much more exciting game this morning against Coventry, 2-0 win. Who saw that coming? Where'd that come from?
I don't want to sound like I predicted it, but there's just something about Coventry City. I know that, historically they're a very new team to that area of the championship. Like to see them, pushing for a promotion spot, or certainly a playoff place. Before this morning, I know that they're a gutsy side, and they did have some recent okay form heading in, and I know certainly at the start of the season they were flying, but they're just not one of those teams that you kind of on paper, or I guess a club that you associate with dominance. Like there's not really a fear of visiting Coventry City, and I say that with all due respect because I think what they've achieved is fantastic, but it's certainly not in the last decade or so would we look at them as a club to fear. And so you always kind of wonder when a club like that, particularly in those tough fights, for those playoff spots, as we know, we've been a mid-table championship team, certainly under Nigel Pearson and before the Steve Bruce era, and even during the Steve Bruce era, we were probably a little bit higher up. But it's really tough to be one of those mid-table teams and to continually fight, particularly when you do have a big club like Hull, who arguably are certainly bigger in the sense of their reputation and probably their roster too. And so I backed this. I actually really thought that we were a chance this morning, and I was glad to be proven correct in that. Although even though it was 2-0 and we did play well, it's certainly not as comfortable as the scoreline suggested.
Yeah, that's right. You did make that comment second half while we were watching it that they did have a number of really good chances, and we seemed to certainly put the cue in the rack sort of partway through that second half. It seemed as if we'd sort of satisfied ourselves that we'd seen the game out, and we were just happy to sit back. And look, they had that big chance, and I'm glad that you actually found that footage of the goal line decision system that proved my instinct right. That I think when the ball's in the air and it's traveling towards the goal line and then kind of gets deflected back, the natural instinct is that, oh, it must have crossed the goal line, because you just think it's in the air, it's traveling, it bounces and you've got that bit of grass and everyone thinks you see the grass, it means it's over the line, which isn't always the case. But I was as sure as I could be that it hadn't actually crossed the line, because, well, first of all, the watch hasn't gone off, and barring any massive malfunction of that, you'd think that would be accurate. And Greaves just puts his body on the line and does brilliantly for us to keep it at 2-0. And that's the chance. You think if that goes in, all of a sudden we're in for a nervy last 10, 15 minutes, whatever it was going to be. But we saw them out. And as I said earlier, another clean sheet in the books for Ingram as well, which was great.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought in some ways the second goal really pushed them, in the sense that they seem to lose a lot of composure in their play. And it actually it pains me to say this, but it very much felt like a City team chasing a game. Like the amount of times that people have visited the KCOM this season and got a lead, and you've watched us try to play our way back in, and you kind of the game becomes very open and scrappy, and you try to overshoot your passes. And that was very much the story of how Coventry tried to get back in. You saw that it was really easy for us to get in between the lines and break up the play. And full credit to City, I think we defended with a ton of gusto, and they just kept showing up for each other, and and making it difficult for Coventry. But I think Coventry in so many ways beat themselves, and that's why that moment was so crucial, because I do think if they had got that goal in the 83rd minute and were given 10 minutes to push, that's where things become a little bit more nervy. Your defenders have that little bit more doubt, and things amp up a little bit. So as you said, the ball has to cross the entire line, and the watch never went off. So in this case, we'll trust the technology and be very grateful that whatever millimeter or
it would have been close.
It probably saved our bacon on the day.
Yeah, we've got John in the comments saying, so he was watching a Coventry fan thing on YouTube after at the game. They were a bit iffy on getting the win after the win over the Blades, because they did beat Sheffield United 4-1, I think it was, on the weekend. So I guess it's that sort of instinct of, you have a big win and then you sort of, come back to earth. And thankfully we saw Luton had a pretty big win today as well. So maybe that theory can hold up for the weekend. Then just on the goals themselves. So Smallwood with the first goal after, I think it was only about 10 or so minutes, 10, 15 minutes. Pretty tame shot, I would say, at the keeper. And the keeper probably should have done a bit better with it, but got us off to the perfect start, and great to see him get a goal.
Look, I want to come to the aid of the keeper in this particular instance. Because as I watched it live, I think I agreed. There was very much a strong case that he's just had an absolute howler. But if you actually watch the shot from Smallwood again, there's a real deviation. Like the ball actually kind of hits the valve and swings back, and he hit it very hard, quite low to the ground. So I think it was one of those ones that probably came at the keeper much quicker than he thought, and it moved. So just that, the angle where it's tucked under his body. Look, I'd still be aggrieved as a Coventry fan to see it go in, but I think it probably is a little bit more difficult of a save on replay than it actually looked live. So I'm going to fair play to Smallwood. I think he hit the ball, fantastically well, and got his just desserts. But
did you see the comments after the game? It's also just on Smallwood about the club sort of meeting with him in the next couple of weeks to sort out a new contract. Would you be keen for him to stick around for another year or so?
That's a really fascinating one, because I don't think that I've always been a big fan of Smallwood's.
It seems very polarizing. Yeah.
He does. He seems like he's one of those kind of, I dare say, like Ashby-like players, where he's always there. He loves a challenge. He really has that kind of knit and grip without having a real sense of quality. And so that's probably one of the big things that I would say that I don't always feel confident with Smallwood. However, with that being said, he does certainly seem to have the respect of the playing group, and clearly is looked upon as one of those real working class heroes in the city ranks. So look, if that's the way they're heading, and they do believe that he has a role to play, well fair play. If he's going to keep putting up the performances that he has been recently, and can find a way to solidify a spot in the side, well fair play. I mean, you got to remember now we've got Slatter, we've got Doherty, we've got Honeyman. There's no shortage of bodies who can play in those central midfield roles. The thing that I probably do like about Smallwood is he's certainly a defensive midfielder that that loves to be, I guess, that block and give some coverage for our centre half. So interesting contract. I'm not upset about it. I'm not amazed by it. It makes sense.
Yeah, and look, it could well be that he'll end up moving into that Huddleston sort of role of, he'll play, I don't know, half a dozen, 15 games for the season, but he's more just there as that presence around the dressing room. He's certainly one of the more experienced players in the squad. And I'll be honest, I thought when we signed him from, I think it was Blackburn, and he'd had been out for the entire year or something with injuries, and I thought, how's his body going to hold up? Played most of the season in League One, then was injured towards the end, and that's when Slater really got his chance. But then coming into this season, I don't think he's really missed that many games at all with injury, if any, which is a real positive for him. And look, if he can keep that form up, and he was terrific this morning, he certainly has a place in the squad, I think. And he spoke this morning about saying he's really playing and doing all he can to earn a new contract. So he clearly wants to stick around.
Yeah, and fair play. I think that he's proven in the sense that he is a leader, and if that's the leader that they're looking for in the City dressing room, I mean, things may be very different under Shotter. We just don't know. I think it's too early to say.
Yeah. And then the second goal, Longman almost broke the goal in half. Pretty powerfully struck strike. Really good to get that second goal for a bit of safety and security, I guess, in the result, and really set us on our way. But good to see him back amongst the goals, as I sort of alluded to earlier. I think playing him in that right wing back spot really suits him, and it really brings the best out of him.
He just looks so confident when he scores, doesn't he? There's a real purpose. Like that shot, as you said, blazed off, nearly broke the crossbar, how hard it was hit. But he just peeled off and headed straight to the corner as if that's what I'm here to do, kind of thing. There's just a real assurance. And as you said, it's great to see him back in the goals. And I mean, what did we pay for him? £300,000 or something absurd? What a signing.
Yeah, no, terrific from him as well. Eves as well. This was a great display from Eves, I thought, and really deserved a goal out of it. So it was a bit unfortunate he didn't get it. There was that play, I think it was late in the second half or halfway through the second half. He sort of, it wasn't really a Cruyff turn, but it was some sort of like, it sort of reminded me of that Diomande turn against Crystal Palace a few years ago. It was like that, he just sort of weaved in and out of the defenders and got through. And it was brilliant to see. And I love a Tom Eves full of confidence. Like, we saw it against Everton in the Cup. When he's full of confidence, he's just on top of his game. And look, I really hope he does get that run in the side and can get that confidence up and start to score a few goals, because he looks terrific when he can do it.
Yeah, and I guess that now it's kind of starting to get talked about a little bit more in the regard to how much his hold-up plays improved. I mean, there's so many times now where you see Tom Eves, I mean, putting balls in behind and expecting him to blister, defenders with his pace is just not his game. But when we do get higher up the pitch and we're able to find his feet, he has proven a very, very quality hold-up player for us. And I know that there was the shot where he hit it with his left foot and the keeper saved it on the near post. But just for him to actually kind of back himself enough to make that space and have the shot, as I said, it's not necessarily his game, but when you see him doing things like that, you can tell that there's an air of confidence in the way he's playing.
Yeah, that's right. We had a few players back from injuries as well. Did Force end up on the pitch? I know Elia got on the pitch this morning.
He was certainly.
Force he came on against Birmingham, I think, from memory. I'm just checking the lineups now, so I'm actually know what I'm talking about. Yeah, Force came on against Birmingham, but yeah, Elia back on the pitch this morning was good to see. I kind of would have liked to see him on a bit earlier. I thought the way that Coventry were letting us have so much space in midfield, I really thought it was a game suited to him with his pace. Would have been great to see him have a bit of time to work his way into the side. But that being said, I mean, good to see him back from injury and getting some minutes in the legs as well. And yeah, I mean, I thought Slater coming in for Doherty probably wasn't his best game, I have to say. I think he was a bit sloppy at times, but I thought he was good enough. And it shows that we've got that depth in midfield that we can rotate the players like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think one of the things is probably, undervalued in respect to, we're very quick to jump on Shotter and talk about his management in the sense that he's a new manager to the English game and that kind of stuff. But when we do have a 2-0 lead like that, yes, there is a tension to want to kind of, throw the kitchen sink and while we've got momentum, bring on a star striker and all the rest of it. And sure, that may have been the play. But I think it shows a real level of discipline in his management to say that, well, things are working here. We've got a 2-0 lead and, our shape seems to be good. We're still providing options where we look like we can hurt them. And I think that's a really, important thing to be able to identify because we're very quick to jump on it when things go wrong. And so just as how we might operate as managers, when we see the right call potentially. I mean, it was the right call when we walk away with the 2-0 victory. That it's worth praising as well. So I think fair play to him in that particular instance.
Yeah, I was going to ask you as well, just what I mean, we're sort of, I don't know what it is, 10 games, maybe 8 games into Shotter's reign now, and we've had a couple of good wins. We had the win against Swansea. We got the win today, obviously, and I think there was another win that I'm now forgetting for Shotter. Couple of disappointing defeats as well. Sort of starting to get a better picture of what his City team looks like. I guess we probably won't have a properly clear picture until he gets his chance to bring some players in summer. It was the Peterborough win, of course. But what do you make of Shotter so far? How are you feeling? Like if we were to say we're coming into next season with aims of promotion and we're going to basically have a blank checkbook, so to speak, for Shotter to bring in the players he wants, do you have the confidence that he's the man who can take us up? Or too early to say?
I think we have to say that it's still too early to say. And I know that that's the easy out, but I think that when you kind of look at where we were when he took over, I mean, the ceiling would be a miracle run. We sneak into the playoffs and everything's booming. I mean, that the ideal scenario, very unlikely going to happen. And then you look at kind of what could have been is where, he loses every game and puts us right back down into the relegation scrap. And, I guess there might be an argument before the 4 points that we're talking about on this episode today that he could have been closer to that. But I think he's about where he should be in the sense that he hasn't done too much damage. He hasn't really set the world alight. But like you said, this isn't his team that he's playing with. Like I think that's the thing that we always kind of tried to give, McCann benefit of the doubt with, is he was working on a shoestring budget and the players that he was playing with weren't necessarily all his players. It's not like he signed them. He might have been part of it, but I'm sure there was a lot of players that Grant McCann wanted that simply at the time of where the club was at, the answer was no. So I think to sum up Shotter is he's probably about where we expect him to be. I'm still confident that if he's given free rein and can go and sign some people, then we start to get a real picture of who he is as a manager and the type of players that that he likes to operate within the system that he wants to play under. And I don't think that with this current crop we've been able to see the two kind of marry up. So I'm not unhappy with him, but I'll certainly be willing to comment. I was going to say this time next year, but I'll probably have an opinion before that.
Yeah, look, I'm really undecided, like you say. I kind of keep fluctuating because there's some games that I watch where I think his game management is spot on, and you look at some of the even game to game where you say, oh, he's clearly learned lessons from that game. He's changed the team up, and he's learning. He's not a McCann who's stuck in his way, stubborn, saying this is how we've got to play, and seeing the losses pile up. He's learning, he's changing, he's doing all these things. It's great. And then you have other games like the Derby game, for instance, where we were 2-0 down and getting blown away. And we came out after halftime, made no changes and conceded a third goal. And it got to about the 65th minute before we made a change. And you think, why has it taken so long? What are you doing? You've lost kind of grip on the game. So I'm still very undecided on like the jury's still out very much for me on what sort of manager he is, what his game day management is like. And I think, as you say, I think it's going to be maybe 2 months into the new season before we can really confidently say, yes, this is the manager that we need to stick with to go up, and he just needs more time and more investment, or to say, look, he's had his chance, he's brought players in, they're not working, we're not getting the results, let's move on. I think it's not going to be till, call it, I don't know, October, November next season before we start to have a clearer picture. So at the moment, it just feels very much like, we win a game against Coventry and you think this is brilliant, like everything's going brilliantly, and then we'll go out and we'll lose to Reading or something and we'll say, what on earth's going on? This is a disaster. Yep. So, so we'll see what comes of it in the end. Okay, well, I'll run through my MVP votes, and they've actually completely changed from the set that I sent through to you, because as I was saying before, the players, as we talk about the game more, and then I think about the performances, and I think there's so many players to try to fit into the 3 votes, but I've actually flipped it completely, and I've got the 3 votes for Smallwood. I thought his performance in the center of the park was magnificent, capped off with the goal. But just as you say, his ability to run that block for the defense, when he's on top of his game, as he was today, I think he's one of our best performers, along with Honeyman, who I've given the 2 votes to. I thought they were both really strong performers in midfield. I think it was it Honeyman who provided the assist for Smallwood's goal?
Was the assist,
yeah. So I thought they were both fantastic. And then I've given the 1 vote to Eves. I sort of talked myself into it as we were talking about his performance. I thought these sorts of performances from Eves I really enjoy, and it'd be great if he could get a goal to cap this sort of performance off. But when he's playing like this, as you said as well, like his hold-up play, there was a passage where he dropped in. I think we were breaking, and he was the only player up the field for us. And he could have just kept running and found himself in their half on his own with no support. But instead, he sort of turned back, he held it up, he got through a few players and waited for players to come up the field to him. And I was like, this is what we need. This is what Force is lacking when it's Force up top, is that hold-up presence and that ability to actually draw the players into the play and not just keep running, get isolated, and then turn the ball over.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that. I don't think that there's any harm in giving Tom Eves a point in this one. Look, I've very, very much flipped mine as well, but the 3 points for me actually is I was going to give it to Honeyman, and it's simply because I thought that he, as you said, there was the Smallwood assist. I mean, he also hit the corner, which was in some ways a Longman assist, although it wasn't necessarily direct the way the ball went back to him. But I thought that Honeyman just had his, standard working class effort. I was going to give Longman 2 points because I thought that his goal was hit with such conviction and would end up being crucial. I'm going to give my 1 point to KLP, and the reason I'm giving my 1 point to KLP is, and I know that it's marred because or I'm just too much on his effort that was saved, because you give we got stuck into the Coventry keeper in the sense that he probably should have saved the shot from Smallwood. The save that he put on KLP's shot was one of the more impressive keeper saves that I've seen. That effort from KLP cutting in and hitting the ball with the ferocity that he did, that moved a long way in the air. And if that goal had gone in, that would have been one of the best goals I think I've seen in my time watching City. Like, that is definitely on the
that's like the Giovanni scale. Yeah,
that's exactly right. And I just, you see moments like that, and you realize that the quality and the caliber of King Lewis Potter and the type of player he's going to be. Just every time he gets the ball and he's able to run at defenders down the edge, you see a real nervousness in the way that they approach him, and he's just able to kind of step over the ball and just create space. So every single time he's on the field and we're able to unleash him, and you see glimpses of things like that, he is by far our most threatening player. And I think, that's what factors into why he got the 1 point. I don't think he had the most impressive game in the sense that he wasn't on the score sheet or anything like that. But I mean, that shot in itself was incredible. And he was responsible for a lot of, a lot of very good build-up passages and play.
No, spot on. I think I saw the comment on Twitter that he's got to have one of the best first touches of a City player that I can remember. And I have to agree with that comment from that person. As you say, I mean, like he's another one. When he's on top of his game, he puts in such brilliant performances to watch. And that shot that he had, as you said, and him linking up with Fleming down the left, like they've got such a good relationship going. Greaves as well down that side. It's great to see those sort of the Hull-born players really having that connection and gelling in that sense down that side of the pitch, and you get the overlaps and everything going with them, and it's fantastic. So it was a terrific performance from him as well. Okay, Well, talking about left-sided players, we do have our triple flashback feature this week. It's a really tricky one, and I acknowledge that on the outset. We are sort of scraping the barrel on these ones. I came up with a whole list of, sort of three-point questions or three answer questions at the start of the season, and we're sort of running low on them as we come towards the end of the season. So we'll see how we go with this one, but. I noticed the other day it was Andy Robertson's birthday, so I thought it was a good opportunity to whip this one out because Robbo wore the number 3 for us in his last season, I do believe. But I wanted to see if you could name the last 3 City players to wear the number 3, including the present owner of the number 3. And I can give you clues on each player if you do need them.
Okay, yeah, I feel like I've walked into an ambush with this one. Usually, I like the questions because I feel like there's one or two, pure gimmies. Okay, this is tough.
So yeah. I guess my clue would be. Oh, actually, was he a left back? So one of them is definitely a left back, the current one. If that's going to be a big clue. I think the other 2 are actually centre backs, if I'm not mistaken. One of them I'm a bit unsure of whether I can't actually remember. I'm pretty sure they're both centre backs. So one we signed from, one was one of those typical like random European club signings who came in for 2 seasons. I think we actually paid a fee for him, but then was constantly injured. So really only made maybe 10, 15 appearances for us, which is the one I don't blame you for not getting. The other one played for us in Grant McCann's first season and was sold when we got relegated. And I don't know if this is a clue that helps, but towards the end of the season, he was the player who, when all the fans were getting fed up with the results, he came out to the gates and tried to apologize for the players and talk to the fans. And I can tell you the club he was sold to if you need another one.
How am I forgetting this? I feel like I'm going to blame my week of sickness on why I can't think.
So can you get the current one? So current left back.
Our current left back.
Not Fleming.
Well, it can't be Callum Elder.
It's Callum Elder.
Okay, so Callum Elder is the easiest one that I'll get. How I've forgotten this player that came out too. I remember
he scored a screamer against Brentford as well.
And I remember singing his praises on the podcast too, for addressing the fans. Oh.
He was sold to Wickham. That's all right.
I know who it is, and I cannot think for the life of me what his name is, and that is.
And the third one, I don't think you're going to get, which is totally fine. They're both pretty obscure. So Ryan Tafazoli.
Ryan Tafazoli
wore the shirt in 2019-20, and then Andre Mazouk, who's one of those like completely obscure players. Yeah, but I was surprised because I maybe it's just because of Robbo and Elder, but I always think of the number 3 as a left back shirt, and I guess Andy Dawson as well, didn't he? Wore the number 3.
Yeah, I think he did.
So having a few centre backs wearing it's a bit of a curveball, but there you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there you have it.
I knew that was going to be a tricky one going into it, and it certainly proved to be the case. But look, we'll move on. We'll talk Luton this weekend. I think we sort of talked previously about the fact it's the £2 game. So with the West Stand upper open as well, should hopefully. I haven't seen reports on the crowd or how ticket sales are going. But as you sort of alluded to this morning, I feel like with that win against Coventry, we're pretty much safe now, but a win against Luton would just about secure it, you would think.
Yeah, that's kind of the thinking that I've got at the moment. I think 44 points is certainly, far too much of a gap for the bottom 3 to be able to overcome. I also think now as well, and you mentioned this in our podcast chat as well, is we've brought Birmingham back into play now. We've brought like Reading in that position, so it's not really a concern. I think that you're always thinking if you're the 4th bottom side, if you're kind of that one spot above relegation, then you're always in the fight. But I think the gap now would just be far too big, especially when you consider the caliber of the teams. Like I know Barnsley beat us, so we've got to be careful how much shade we throw. But I'd be really interested to see if they were able to stave the drop. I think there's still a lot of fight in Derby, but you just wonder how much of an emotional toll it's kind of taking them season. That would be above us with the points that they've returned this year, only to find themselves 6 points adrift. So there's a lot going on down there that I'm certainly glad that we're not a part of. And of course there's Peterborough as well, who I think you're going to find it really tough to force their way out. So I'm not too worried now. I think that we can safely start planning for next season, but I also think we've probably got another 2 or 3 victories in us ourselves with this run home.
Yeah, I thought the timing, I don't know if it's the timing or the nature of the conversation this morning around Smallwood's contract was interesting as to whether they were targeting a certain number of points that we've now essentially hit to now start actually saying, okay, we can sit down with players, we can say to them confidently that we'll be a championship club next season, set out the terms, start to draw up contracts, because I would sort of expect over the next few weeks, especially if we were to get another win against Luton, that we'd start to see players re-signing, we'd start to see movement on players' futures, because we've become so accustomed under the alums to just seeing contracts run down, no communication, players not knowing what's going on. I suspect it's going to be very different now, and we're going to start to get a lot more movement earlier, hopefully, fingers crossed, on player renewals. So, certainly I think if we can get the win against Luton, that would be the case.
And as you've kind of touched on with that as well, if our new owner is all that he's cracked up to be and he's genuine in the things that he's kind of said, he's actually come in and really taken the time to kind of learn a bit of the history of the club and to listen to the fans and what has worked and what hasn't worked. And I know that we've talked about it. We've banged that drum for many years about how frustrated we've been with the way that City operate with contracts. And, you see people walk out the door, often because of the timing and just how poor, I guess, the alums were at making that a transparent process. And so if our new owner has listened and heeded that advice, well, why not? Why not start getting all the eggs in a row for Shota and help him build the team that he wants and give him the best chance for the start of next championship season, as opposed to waiting to the back end of the off season and then having to scrounge for players.
Yeah, that's right. Well, speaking of the team as well, so Luton 3 wins in their last 5. After that performance against Coventry this morning, though, would you make any changes to this side? We've seen the news that Baxter's out until after the international break as well. So, not that Ingram in any way deserves to be missing out on a position. I'd almost say, as we sort of alluded to, maybe Doherty back in for Slater, I guess. But otherwise, it's pretty much our best 11, and we just go with it again.
I think so. And I think at the same time, you do want to try and build that culture where you can reward players. Like when you go away and you pick 2 points up against a team that were, challenging for a promotion place or certainly a playoff place, that's a great knock and a very tidy performance. So you do want to kind of build on that momentum. I'd be really surprised to see changes in this one.
Yeah, no, agreed. So how do you feel about the game going into it? I mean, Luton, a pretty tough opponent. They're sort of pushing for the playoff places in a pretty similar position to Coventry, to be honest. Did get the win yesterday morning, I think it was 4-0 winners against whoever it was they were playing. I'll look that up. But how do you feel about coming up against them?
Yeah, look, I think Luton are one of those teams at the moment where you can see that they've kind of, got the wind in their sails, so to speak. But and some really quality signings. I think Rob Snodgrass is.
Completely forgot about that. Yeah,
and I believe that Stewart is still there as well.
Stewart's there.
I know that they pushed Chelsea all the way in their cup tie a few weeks ago.
And Reece Burke, of course.
Reece Burke. So that's right. So we'll be coming up against some familiar faces. Look, I think Luton, to their credit, do look like a team on the rise and have certainly made some quality signings and seem to be doing all the right things. So by no means is this going to be an easy victory. An easy game. I think that we may struggle. I think a draw would be a good result. If we're able to pinch 3 points, well, not only would it assure us of our safety, but it'd be an incredibly pleasing scalp, I guess, to get at this stage of the season. But I think it'll be tough. I think it'll be really tough. I'm probably more tipping a draw if I'm optimistic in this one.
Yeah.
1-1.
Yeah, no, you mentioned Kevin Stewart there, and I thought he was at Luton as well. I just looked it up. He's at Blackpool, and I get those two always mixed up. But
Yeah.
what I was thinking, Kevin Stewart with Luton was, I don't know if you remember the game. I think it was McCann's first season where he got that really crazy goal where it was like right on the goal line or something.
Yeah, the 3-0 win. I do
Yeah,
remember that. It was
did he get 2 goals in that game?
He might have. I can't remember that game was such an interesting game to watch. I remember like the goals were really interesting, and it had that game. I remember it being crucial at the time as well.
Yeah.
I think coming off a pretty poor patch, and it was really important that we got the 3 points, and it was emphatic in the end. But I just remember so much happening. It was one of those strange away days where you just it's stuck in your mind.
Yeah. It looks like John's also tipping us for the draw. I think that's right. I think, look, if we can get a draw against Luton, it would be, what's that, 5 points in 3 games. That's a pretty good return for us to get. And it's a difficult one because we've still got 9 games left in the season, but it's sort of at that point now where once we I guess it's just about becoming mathematically safe. That's the aim. But there's nothing else to really play for. Maybe to push up the table a little bit. We're sitting there is it 18th now, so we've got a chance to push up a little bit further now that we've gone past Birmingham. Sorry, we're 19th now, 2 points behind Bristol City, 5 points behind Cardiff and Stoke, 6 points behind Swansea. So probably Swansea in 15th, about as high as I think we could end up. Preston in 14th on 51 is probably a bit too far ahead of us. But that's about it. And look, if you'd given me that at the start of the season that we'd be basically nothing to play for with 9 games left, I'd be perfectly happy with that.
Yeah, it's a very positive trajectory from promotion in League One to mid-table or lower mid-table in the Championship. It shows that we're headed in the right direction, particularly when you consider everything that's come out of this season. The best thing is probably the sale of the club. So there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic heading forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Plenty of reasons to be optimistic.
And Alex, I did have one question for you as well before we roll. And I know that this one's probably not, well, it's definitely not City related, but maybe it is in the sense that it's a relegation rival if you still put us in that bracket. What do you think with Derby? Are you happy for them to stay up? Do you want to see them survive, or do you kind of err on the side of they breach the rules and should suffer?
That is, it is a tricky one. I probably started the season and still to a large extent am pretty happy for them to go down, breach the rules. They know what they've done. And a lot of them were complicit in it at the time. I mean, the owner was, selling the stadium to himself to get around FFP, and all the supporters were quite happy for him to do it. So you can't say that it's sort of a shock for them or anything like that. But the fact that he's now gone, they've been in administration for the whole season. It's a little bit like Wigan, though not quite the same. I mean, Wigan hadn't really breached the rules in that sense. And there is that element of, you want that fairy tale finish to the season. You want them to stay up for Rooney and doing all that. But look, it'd be nice. It'd be nice to go down to the final day and be a bit dramatic between Reading and Derby. I think just for the, you want that relegation battle going to the end. It'd be a shame if Barnsley and Derby drop off a bit and it kind of gets settled before the final day. But yeah, look, mixed feelings, I guess. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm still in the fence. That's why I thought I'd ask you, because I go through waves, and I do think it would be a really, really special story for Wayne Rooney as a manager to be able to achieve.
And Liam Rosenior as well.
That's right.
Assistant, yeah.
That's right. So there's, I'm neither here nor there. It swings in roundabouts, but I agree. I think an exciting relegation battle is better than one that's concreted and sewn up well before the end of the final day.
Yeah, and speaking of, look, if they do go down, I would absolutely love us to poach Rosenior as an assistant manager. Everything that I sort of hear and read about his progression in football just screams that he's just a very intelligent man, very astute in what he does. And knowing the club, loving the club in the area, his nana's from Hull after all, it would be great to get him back here in some sort of capacity if they were to go down.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Absolutely. Okay, well, look, it's an international break after this weekend, so we won't be back for 2 weeks. But we'll be back after the international break to talk Luton result and look ahead for the last few games of the season. But until then, thanks for joining me on this one, Logan.
My pleasure, Alex. Good to be here.
No worries. And thanks everyone for listening in. Until next time, come on, City.